The call came at 2:47 in the afternoon. Not to a phone on a kitchen counter. Not to a phone in a pocket or a purse or on a nightstand where phones wait to deliver bad news at the hours when bad news tends to arrive. It came to the floor manager's headset of the Family Feud studio in Los Angeles, California, relayed from the production front desk, which had received it from the hospital switchboard in Savannah, Georgia, which had placed it after a 17-year-old girl named Zoe Whitmore had been sitting in a hospital waiting room for 4 hours with a broken wrist and a phone at 6% battery, and a single name she kept giving to the nurses who kept asking her who to call. Her father. His name was Daniel Whitmore. He was 43 years old. He was standing at a contestant podium on the Family Feud stage with 32 points and a grin and absolutely no idea that his daughter had been in a car accident at 10:52 that morning. He had left Savannah at 5:30 a.m. He had been in the air when it happened. He had landed at Lax, taken a shuttle, cleared security, done the green room briefing, eaten half a granola bar, and played 2 rounds of Family Feud with the focused, cheerful energy of a man who had been looking forward to this for 6 months. He did not know. The floor manager knew. She had received the relay at 2:47. She had stood at the edge of the stage for 11 seconds, the 11 seconds it takes a person in a professional capacity to decide what to do when personal information arrives in a production environment, and then she had walked to Steve Harvey. She had said 4 words into his earpiece, not the same 4 words as before, different 4 words, the kind that do not get said on a game show. Steve Harvey had been mid-sentence. He stopped mid-sentence. He looked at the floor manager. He looked at Daniel Whitmore at the podium. And then he did something that the production team in 13 years of taping this show had never seen the host do during an active round. He called time, not a commercial break, not a scheduled pause. He said, "Hold everything." He crossed the stage. He reached Daniel before anyone else did. What happened in the next 22 minutes was not a game show. It was a father finding out his daughter needed him. In a building full of strangers, in a city far from home, in a moment that had nothing to do with prizes or questions or the board that still showed his 32 points. And what happened after that? What Daniel Whitmore did, and what his family did, and what Steve Harvey did with a microphone and a room full of people who had come for entertainment and stayed for something else, was something nobody in that building planned and nobody who was there forgot. The Whitmore family had flown from Savannah on the earliest flight they could get, which departed at 6:15 a.m. and required Daniel to be at the airport at 4:30, which required him to be awake at 3:45, which his wife Imani had categorized as not a problem with the tone of a woman who had categorized many things as not a problem and meant it. Imani Whitmore was 41. She taught high school English in Savannah and had the specific organizational precision of someone who had spent 17 years keeping 30 teenagers simultaneously on task. She was the one who had submitted the Family Feud application. She was the one who had organized the flights, the hotel, the team. She had told Daniel about the trip 2 months in advance because she knew from 19 years of marriage that Daniel required more lead time than most people, and she had calibrated accordingly. 2 months, he had said, looking at the calendar. Yes, she said, that's a lot of lead time. For you it's appropriate, she said. He had not argued with this. The team was 5. Daniel and Imani, Imani's younger brother Marcus, 36. An electrician from Atlanta who had agreed to come without asking many questions because Imani had called him and said they needed a 5th, and Marcus understood that when Imani called and said they needed something, it was not a request with a lot of nuance. Imani's mother, Hannah, 64, who had been watching Family Feud since the show's first iteration and who had opinions about the rule changes over the decades that she was prepared to share with anyone who asked and several people who hadn't. And Daniel's cousin Felix, 31, who had come because Daniel was his favorite cousin and also, as Felix told everyone, because Los Angeles was warm in October and Savannah was not. Zoe, Daniel and Imani's daughter, 17, had not come. She had been supposed to come. She had been the 6th application, the 6th seat, the teenager whose slot the producers had accommodated before a rule clarification about age requirements for the main contestant section had moved her to the audience portion, and then 3 weeks before the taping, she had texted her mother at 11:47 at night. "Mom, Kylie's birthday party is that weekend. Can I just stay with Grandma Wren?" Imani had said yes. Grandma Wren lived 12 minutes from their house. Zoe had stayed in Savannah. She was driving home from the birthday party on Sunday morning when the other car ran the light on Montgomery Street. A broken wrist, some bruising. The ER doctor had said lucky 3 times, which was either reassuring or the opposite depending on how you processed it. Zoe was fine. She was going to be fine. She was sitting in the waiting room with a cast and a phone at 6%, and she had given her father's name to the nurse because her mother's phone had gone to voicemail twice. Imani's phone was in her purse in the green room. It was on silent. It had been on silent since the pre-show briefing per the producer's instruction. So the hospital had called the studio, and the studio had called the floor manager's headset at 2:47 in the afternoon. Daniel Whitmore had been a high school football coach in Savannah for 14 years. Not the head coach, the offensive coordinator, which is the position that does a significant percentage of the work and receives a proportionate amount of the credit, and which suited Daniel because he was not, fundamentally, a man who needed the front of the room. He was the man who prepared the front of the room. He built the play systems. He drilled the linemen in the early morning before anyone arrived. He made the adjustments at halftime that determined whether the second half went differently from the first. He was good at it. He was good at it in the specific way of someone who found the gap between what was planned and what was needed and filled it before anyone realized it had been empty. He had been filling gaps since Zoe was born. She had arrived 6 weeks early in the spring of 2007, in a hospital in Savannah, at 3:17 in the morning, with the specific urgency of a child who was not going to wait. Daniel had been in the waiting room for 4 hours before that, not pacing, because Daniel did not pace, but sitting with his forearms on his knees and his eyes on the door, the posture of a man who has given everything that was his to give and is now in the part of the situation where the situation is someone else's and he has to trust it. He had not been good at that part. He had gotten better at it. 17 years of Zoe had required it. She was not the kind of child who created easy situations. She was curious and stubborn and precise. She had Imani's precision and his stubbornness, which was a combination that had produced, at various points, a child who rebuilt her bicycle from scratch at 11, who argued with her history teacher about a primary source citation at 15 and was correct, who had insisted on learning to drive on a manual transmission because she said automatics were not honest about what driving was. Daniel had taught her on the manual, 3 Sunday mornings in an empty parking lot in March. She had stalled the car 14 times on the first morning and 8 times on the second and twice on the third, and she had gripped the wheel each time with the expression of someone who was going to understand this if it took all year. "You don't have to do it today," he'd said after the 5th stall. "I know," she said. "I want to." That was Zoe. She had gotten her license in April. She had driven to school every day since. She had never, in 7 months of driving, been in an accident. Until Sunday. In the studio in the family section, on the opposite side from Daniel's contestant podium, Imani was sitting with her hands folded in her lap and her phone silent in her purse, and no knowledge of what had happened to her daughter 9 hours earlier and 2,400 miles away. She had texted Zoe that morning from the hotel at 7:22. "Thinking of you. We're about to head over. Be good. Love you." Zoe had not replied. Imani had not worried about this. Zoe was 17. 17-year-olds did not always reply immediately. She was probably asleep at Grandma Wren's, which was where she was supposed to be, in the house 12 minutes from theirs. She was not at Grandma Wren's. She was in the Savannah ER waiting room with a purple cast on her right wrist and a phone at 6%, and the particular quality of calm that comes to a person who has made the necessary calls and is now simply waiting for the people who need to know to know. In her purple cast, the color she had chosen herself from 6 options, in the 20 minutes she'd had before the casting tech arrived, she had asked Grandma Wren to bring her the small thing she kept in her room. Not her phone charger. Not a book or a change of clothes. She had asked for the laminated card that lived on the corkboard above her desk. The one Daniel had made for her when she was learning to drive, a small card, 3 inches by 5, with the 3 things he said before every driving lesson. Not rules, not instructions. The 3 things he always said when she was about to do something that required her to trust herself. "You know more than you think. You're ready even when you don't feel it. I'll be right here." She had read it twice in the waiting room. She was fine. She needed her dad to know she was fine. The first game had gone cleanly. The Whitmore family played against the Ray's Kim family from Spokane, 6 members, the kind of family that had clearly practiced, whose team captain was a 45-year-old woman named Dolers who answered questions with the precision of someone who had been right about things for a long time and expected to continue. Imani played front. She was quick and disciplined and had the competitive focus of someone who had been managing teenagers for 17 years and knew how to stay several steps ahead of a situation. Daniel played second. He was slower to the buzzer than Imani, but more accurate than she gave him credit for, which he had been hearing about for 19 years and had made peace with. He got 4 answers right without ceremony and said nothing notable about any of them. Hannah answered one question with such certainty that Steve Harvey stopped and looked at the board and then looked at her and said, "How did you know that?" "I watched the show," she said. "Ma'am," he said, "a lot of people watch the show." "They watch it," she said. "I study it." The audience received this with the warmth appropriate to someone who has just distinguished themselves by being entirely correct. They won the first game. During the break, Steve Harvey moved through the sections. He went to the Ray's Kim family first, got a story about Dolar's husband eating an entire bowl of guacamole at a party, and then discovering it was a decorative display, which landed the way stories land when they are both absurd and clearly true. Then he crossed to the Whitmore side. He went to Daniel first, which was the instinctive move. Daniel was the kind of presence that drew first looks in rooms, not because he was loud or particularly large, but because he had the particular quality of stillness that reads as solidity. You looked at him the way you looked at a well-built structure. "What do you do?" Steve said. "Offensive coordinator," Daniel said. "High school football, 14 years. 14 years of high school football." Steve looked at the family. "This man has the patience of a saint." "He does," Imani said from across the section. "She does not," Daniel said. The audience laughed. Steve laughed. "Tell me about your family," Steve said. Daniel looked at Imani, at Marcus, at Felix, at Hannah. "My daughter was supposed to be here," he said. "She ended up staying home. She's 17. Birthday party took priority." "As it should," Steve said. "She was not happy about missing the show," Daniel said. "She made me promise to FaceTime her if we won something." "Then you better win something," Steve said. "That's the plan," Daniel said. The second game started. It was tighter. The Ray's Kim family had adjusted, Dolars had found a second gear, and the family's younger members had stopped second, guessing their first instincts. The Whitmores stayed ahead by margins that felt slimmer than they were. They made it to fast money. Imani went first, backstage, alone, 18 seconds, 147 points. She came back out and the family could read the score on her face before the board revealed it. High, very high. Daniel stepped up to the contestant position for his turn. He looked at the board. He answered 5 questions in 21 seconds. He was getting ready to hear the score when the floor manager's headset received a call. 2:47 p.m. She moved to Steve Harvey. She said 4 words. Steve Harvey was mid-sentence. He stopped. "Hold everything," he said. The room did not understand what was happening, not immediately. The audience had been in a celebratory posture, fast money completed, score pending, the forward energy of a game show about to deliver its payoff. And "hold everything" was not a phrase in the vocabulary of that posture. People looked at each other. They looked at the stage. Steve Harvey was already moving. He crossed the stage in 7 steps and he reached Daniel at the contestant position and he put his hand on Daniel's shoulder, not dramatically, the steady hand of one man putting himself between another man and what's coming. "I need to talk to you for a minute," he said, quietly, privately. The lapel mic caught it, but the directional level was low. "Let's go over here." Daniel looked at him. He was a man who read situations quickly. 14 years of football had made him faster at it than most. He read Steve Harvey's face in approximately 1 second. Something was wrong. He followed Steve to the edge of the stage, away from the center cameras. Steve said, "Your daughter is okay. I need you to hear that first. She is okay." Daniel heard it. He processed the first sentence. Then he processed what the first sentence implied about the second sentence. "What happened?" he said. Not a question, the flat, controlled statement of a man who has already understood the shape of it and needs only the specifics. "Car accident this morning," Steve said. "She's at the hospital in Savannah, broken wrist. They said she's fine, she's been seen, she wanted you to know she's okay." He paused. "The hospital called here because your wife's phone was on silent." Daniel turned to look at Imani. Imani was in the family section, watching them, with the expression of a woman who had read the same situation Daniel had read and had arrived at the same conclusion, and was holding herself together with the practiced composure of someone for whom composure was a professional skill. She was not composed. She was performing composure with everything she had. Daniel left Steve Harvey's side. He crossed the studio floor to the family section, not running, not because he was controlling himself, but because Daniel Whitmore moved through emergencies the way he moved through everything, with deliberate speed, the speed of a man who knows that panicking does not get you there faster. He reached Imani. He said, "She's okay." Imani's composure lasted exactly 2 more seconds. Then it did what composure does when the person holding it finally has someone to hand it to. It released. Quietly, cleanly, without drama, she put her face in her hands for a moment. Daniel put his arm around her. She stayed there for 3 seconds and then straightened the way she always straightened and looked at him. "What happened?" she said. he told her. Steve Harvey had not followed him. He had stayed at the edge of the stage and given them the room. He was watching the floor manager, who was in a quiet, rapid conversation with the producer about phones and communication and whether a connection to Savannah was possible. The producer nodded. The floor manager nodded. Steve Harvey picked up his microphone. He turned to the audience. The room, which had been in a kind of suspended state, the held breath of 297 people who had watched something happen without knowing what it was, waited. "There's been a family situation," Steve said. "Daniel's daughter was in a car accident this morning in Savannah. She's okay. I want to make sure everyone in this room hears that. She is okay. Broken wrist. She's been seen. She's fine." He paused. "She called from the hospital because she wanted her parents to know." The room exhaled. "We're going to take a few minutes," Steve said. "Because that's what we're going to do. We're going to take a few minutes and we're going to get this family on the phone with their daughter." The audience made a sound, the specific layered sound of people who are relieved and also moved and also remembering, in the private way that public moments trigger private memories, the times when they had been on one end or the other of a phone call like this one. In the family section, Hannah had both hands pressed together. Marcus was looking at the ceiling. Felix had his hand over his mouth. Daniel was still holding Imani's hand. He had not let go. "She wanted us to know she's okay," Imani said. Not to Daniel, to herself, the repetition of something you need to repeat until it fully arrives. "Yeah," Daniel said. "She was alone over there," Imani said. "She was alone at the hospital. For a while," Daniel said. "She called us." "She called the studio," Imani said. "She found a way," he said. "She always finds a way." A production assistant appeared with a tablet. The hospital's patient communications line had been reached. Zoe had been brought back from the waiting room to a consultation room with better connectivity. A face appeared on the screen. 17 years old, purple cast on her right wrist. Dark circles under her eyes that a parent recognizes as the specific tiredness of someone who has been holding things together alone for several hours. And the expression of a girl who has just seen her parents' faces. "I'm okay," Zoe said, before either of them could speak. It was the first thing she said. "I know," Imani said. "I know, baby. The other car ran the light," Zoe said. It wasn't my fault. The police report says it wasn't my fault." "I know," Daniel said. "I'm just saying," she said, "in case you were worried about that part." Daniel looked at the screen. His daughter was in a hospital room in Savannah with a purple cast on her wrist, and she was clarifying the liability situation. "Only you," he said. She almost smiled. "I'm really okay, Dad. It looks worse than it is." "Grandma Wren is here. She got here an hour ago." "Good," Imani said. Her voice was steady now. She had what she needed, the face, the voice, the confirmation that was different from the relay. "We're going to come home." "Mom," Zoe said, "you don't have to." "We're coming home," Imani said, in the tone that concluded discussions. Zoe looked at the tablet camera for a moment. Then she said, "Did you win anything?" The family section made a sound. Not laughter exactly, the breath catch of people who have been in something tense and have just been given a release valve by a 17-year-old with a purple cast asking about prize money from a hospital room. "We haven't checked the score yet," Daniel said. "Dad." She said it with the specific exasperation of a teenager who has been sitting in a hospital for 6 hours and has strong opinions about what counts as a valid excuse. "You were in fast money. Did you get the score?" "There was a situation," he said. "The situation is that I'm fine," she said. "Go check the score." Steve Harvey, who had been standing at a respectful distance during the call, let out a short, genuine laugh. "I like her," he said. "Everyone likes her," Daniel said. "It's exhausting." "Dad, I'm kidding." He looked at the screen. "Zoe, there are 300 people in this studio who just spent 5 minutes worrying about you. I think they deserve to see your face." Zoe looked at the tablet camera. She lifted the purple cast. "Hi," she said, to the room. The room said hi back with the warmth of 300 people who have been worrying about someone for 5 minutes and are very glad she can wave. "Purple cast," Steve Harvey said, stepping forward. "You chose that yourself. There were 6 options," she said. "Purple was the only honest answer." "Okay," Steve said. "I like her a lot." Imani was looking at her daughter's face on the screen. She was cataloging the way parents catalog checking. The eyes, the color, the quality of attention. 17 years of reading this face had given her a precision that no medical report could match. Zoe was okay. She was tired and she had been scared and she had managed it alone for 6 hours and she was okay. "The card," Imani said. "Did you have Grandma Wren bring you the card?" Zoe's expression shifted, the small, specific shift of someone whose private thing has been named in a room larger than the one where they keep it. "Yeah," she said, quieter. "What card?" Daniel said. Zoe looked at the camera. Then she looked somewhere off screen for a moment. "There's a laminated card on my corkboard," she said. "Dad made it when I was learning to drive. 3 things he used to say before every lesson." The studio was quiet. "I read it twice," she said. "In the waiting room before Grandma Wren got there." Daniel was looking at the screen with the expression of a man receiving information about himself that he did not know was being kept. "I didn't know you still had that," he said. "Dad," she said, in the tone of someone explaining something obvious. "Of course I still have it." Steve Harvey stepped forward. He looked at Daniel. "What did it say?" he said. "The card." Daniel looked at the floor for a moment. It was just, he stopped. When she was learning to drive, she would get frustrated. She'd stall the car and she'd grip the wheel and she'd have this look on her face like she was going to make it work through force of will. He paused. "Which is accurate, that's how she does everything. But I wanted her to know I said the same 3 things every time before we started, so she had them." "What were they?" Steve said. Daniel was quiet for a moment. He was not searching for the words. He had the words. He had said them enough times that they were part of him in the way that certain things become part of a person when they have been repeated in important moments. "You know more than you think," he said. "You're ready even when you don't feel it." "I'll be right here." The room received this. In the quiet of a studio audience that has been through something and is now in the particular openness that comes after, the open, receptive state of people who have had their guard dissolved by reality, those 3 sentences landed not as a coaching technique but as something else. As the distilled language of what a parent carries toward a child. What they say when the child is at the wheel and the world is larger than the parking lot. "She had the card," Steve said. "In the hospital before anyone got there." "Yeah," Daniel said. Steve Harvey turned to Zoe on the tablet screen. "Zoe," he said, "can I ask you something?" "Sure," she said. "When you were in that waiting room," he paused. "Why the card? You could have called someone, you could have texted. Why did you ask for the card?" Zoe thought about it. "Because," she said slowly, "when it first happened, when the car stopped and everything was quiet, I didn't know how bad it was. I didn't know if I was okay or not, and I thought about what my dad says before we drove." She paused. "And I thought I know more than I think, and I checked, and I was okay, and I got out of the car." She looked at the camera. "The card was just I wanted to have it, because I'd read it in my head, but I wanted to hold the actual thing, the one he made." She paused. "It smells like our garage. He laminated it in the garage." Daniel put his hand over his mouth. He took it away. He was a man who did not come apart in rooms. 14 years of football and 19 years of marriage had required him to be the man who held things when things needed holding. He had been holding things since 2:47 p.m. He held it now, but the room could see the holding. Steve Harvey faced the audience. "This man," he said, "made a laminated card for his daughter when she was learning to drive. 3 sentences, hung it on her corkboard." He paused. "She's 17 years old. She got in a car accident this morning, alone, 2,000 miles from her parents, and she read that card before anyone got there." He let that sit. "That is," he stopped. He started again with the plain language of a man who has given up on finding the right framing and is going straight to the thing. "That is what it means to prepare someone, not to protect them from the hard moments, to give them something to hold when the hard moments arrive." He looked at Daniel. "You couldn't be there," he said. "You didn't know you were 2,000 miles away on a game show." He paused. "You were there anyway, on a laminated card in a Savannah ER waiting room. You were right there." Daniel looked at the tablet screen, at his daughter's face. "I told you," he said. "I'd be right here." Zoe on the screen pressed her good hand to her mouth. She was 17 and she did not cry easily. She had her father's composure and her mother's precision, and neither of those things made crying easy. But she was also 17 and she had been in a hospital room alone for 6 hours, and her parents' faces were on a tablet screen in a television studio in Los Angeles, and her father had just said what he had always said. She cried, quietly, without apology. "I know," she said. "I know you are." The room did not break into applause. That was what was notable about it afterward, that 300 people in a television studio watched a 17-year-old cry on a tablet screen, and a father hold himself together at the edge of falling apart and did not reach for applause, because applause was not the right shape for it. The room simply stayed in it, present, the way Zoe had stayed present in the parking lot and the waiting room and the consultation room, the way Daniel had stayed present through 4 hours of not knowing. The way the card had stayed present on the corkboard and in the purse of a woman arriving at an ER and in a waiting room before anyone got there. Present was the whole thing. Steve Harvey sat down on the edge of the stage, not the host's mark, not a designed position. He just sat on the edge of the stage the way a person sits when they have been standing for a long time and the moment calls for sitting. "Zoe," he said to the screen. "Yeah," she said. She had wiped her face. She was composed again. She was her father's daughter. "You doing okay?" he said. "Yeah," she said. "I'm good." A pause. "Sorry for ruining the show." "Baby," Steve Harvey said, "you did not ruin the show, you saved it." He paused. "You were the show." The room made a sound. "Your parents are coming home," he said, "but before they go, I want to do something, if it's okay." He looked at Daniel. "We never checked your fast money score," Steve said. "Imani got 147. We don't know what you got." "Can check it now," Daniel said. You okay to check it now? Steve said. Daniel looked at the screen at Zoe. You ready to hear this? He said. I've been waiting all day, she said. Steve Harvey stood up. He crossed to the fast money board. He asked for Daniel's score to be revealed. The board showed 62 points. 147 plus 62, 209. The $25,000 prize lit. Zoe made a sound on the tablet that was audible throughout the studio. Marcus raised both arms. Felix shouted something in the direction of the ceiling. Hannah stood up and sat back down and stood up again. Imani looked at the board. She looked at Daniel. 209, she said. Yeah, he said. You got 62. I did. She looked at him the way a woman looks at a man after 19 years of marriage when he has done something that is within the range of things she expected and is still somehow a surprise. Okay, she said. Told you the plan was to win something, he said. She put her face against his shoulder for exactly 3 seconds, then she straightened. Zoe, she said to the screen, we're going to say goodbye now and get to the airport. Mom, you really don't have to. Grandma Wren is there, Imani said. She has you. We'll be home tonight. Zoe looked at the screen. Okay, she said. She held up the purple cast. Tell the room I said thank you, she said. Steve Harvey held the tablet toward the audience. The room said you're welcome with the warmth of people who have spent the last 40 minutes in a room with a family and feel accurately that they know them. Tell your dad, Steve Harvey said, that the card worked. He knows, Zoe said. She looked at Daniel on the screen. You know, she said. I know, he said. The screen went dark. Steve Harvey stood at the center of the stage with the tablet in his hand and the $25,000 board lit behind him and a room full of people who had come for a game show and ended up somewhere else entirely. He looked at the audience. The Whitmore family, he said, has won $25,000 today. The applause started, finally, at full volume, the kind that had been accumulating in people for 40 minutes and had been waiting for a place to land. It landed. They were on a flight back to Savannah by 7 o'clock. Daniel sat in the window seat and Imani sat beside him, and they did not talk much for the first hour, which was not unusual for them in transit, and was especially not unusual now. There was nothing that needed saying that had not already been said. The not talking was the communication of two people who had been through something and were now in the particular quiet of having come through it. Imani had checked her phone the moment they cleared the studio doors. 12 missed calls, 6 from the hospital, 4 from Grandma Wren, 1 from Zoe at 11:23 a.m., which was the one that had not connected, the one that had sent the cascade of calls that had eventually reached a floor manager's headset in a television studio at 2:47 in the afternoon, and 1 from Zoe at 3:31 p.m. after the tablet call, a voicemail. Imani listened to it in the car on the way to the airport. Zoe's voice, Mom, okay, that was a lot, but also kind of amazing. Tell Dad the room laughed at his joke about it being exhausting. I heard it. You guys should come back sometime, maybe when I can come too. A pause. I love you. Tell Dad the card thing. He'll tell him I read it. He'll know. Imani had listened to the voicemail twice. She had not told Daniel about it until they were on the plane. She played it through his headphones. He listened to it once. He did not say anything for a while. She heard the joke, he said eventually. She heard everything, Imani said. He looked out the window at the dark outside. The card, he said. I made that in the garage 2 years ago on a Tuesday. I know, Imani said. It smells like the garage, he said. She told the room, Imani said. He was quiet. Yeah, he said. She did. They landed in Savannah at 2:17 in the morning. Grandma Wren had kept Zoe up against medical advice that had not been particularly specific about bedtime because Zoe had said she wanted to be awake when they got there. She was on the couch when they came in. Purple cast, dark circles, the expression of someone who has been through something and is very glad it is over. Daniel sat on the couch beside her. He did not say anything. He put his arm around her. She leaned into him. They sat there for a while. The episode aired in December. The clip that moved the way certain things move when they are true and specific and universal at the same time, was not the board lighting up. It was not the tablet call. It was Daniel at the edge of a stage saying the 3 things he had always said before she drove. You know more than you think. You're ready even when you don't feel it. I'll be right here. In the comments, a woman wrote, I need to make a card. My son is 15. I need to make him a card right now. A man wrote, my dad said something like this to me before my first job interview. He said it like it was obvious, like of course I could do it. I had forgotten that until now. He died in 2018. I had forgotten he said that. A woman wrote, she asked for the card before she asked for anything else. That's what good parenting looks like. Not protection, preparation. The card was still on Zoe's corkboard. Purple cast and all, she had put it back herself in the same tack holes as soon as she got home. Daniel saw it there 2 days later when he knocked on her door to tell her dinner was ready. He stood in the doorway for a moment. Dad, she said, dinner. Yeah, he said, I know. He went downstairs. He did not move the card. He never would. If you have something to give someone before the hard moments arrive, a card, a sentence, a habit, a phrase they can read in a parking lot at 10:52 on a Sunday morning when the world has gotten larger than they expected, give it now. Not because the hard moments are coming. They're coming. Give it because when they arrive, you want to already be there. Subscribe if this one stayed with you. We find one every week, stories about ordinary people who were in the right place or the right card at exactly the right moment. We'll be here, right here.